Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Probably begin by reflecting a little bit, as I did for those very few short minutes at the mealtime, just to set the tone, set the stage, so to speak. Evening today being Māgha Pūjā, full moon, typically of February. And it commemorates historically a well-known event in the time of the Buddha. And within the first year of his dispensation, within the first year after his enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, approximately, I guess, about 9 or 10 months after. So his enlightenment was in the full moon of May. And then this was, I think it's 9 months later. So very early on. And the story goes is that 1,250 enlightened beings, arahants, gathered. And they gathered in a place called the Velavana, which translates to the bamboo grove, and that's in present-day Rajgaha. And that's also, it was a place that was a dwelling place, a temporary dwelling place of the Buddha and some disciples. And then nearby, it was also what got developed as Vulture's Peak. It's just very few miles away. And that was a well-known retreat place for the Buddha. And so I gather that at that time, Rajgaha was quite an active population center. When we read about that time, the descriptions in the scriptures, it seems like it was quite a place, and apparently quite a beautiful city, and very active. So anyway, the rough sketch is that the Buddha was there, and it spontaneously, without any prior arrangement, 1,250 of his disciples, people that had actually ordained with him. And so primarily it was the three groups. There were the three Kassapa brothers. They were samanas, before the Buddha's enlightenment. They had their own sanghas. They were their own group of disciples, one of which being 1,000. That's the group that realized Nibbana, or enlightenment, during the fire sermon that was given in Gaya, near Bodh Gaya head. And so then there was the other two brothers with their disciples, and I forget how the numbers break down. It's like 200 and then another 50 or whatever it is. Sorry, I forgot to look that up. And then you also had Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana were part of that group. Apparently they were there that evening as well, that day of the Māgha Pūjā gathering. So just to repeat, they were all direct disciples of the Buddha. Because as they started going off, then people took up after a while, they started taking up the training under other monks. So when I break it down that way, at least for me, then it's much more plausible, because it was basically primarily three groups of disciples coming together. And the Kassapa brothers, they were related by blood and probably all in the same region. And they went to see the Buddha, to gather around the Buddha. So plausible or not, as I said at the mealtime, to me it doesn't really matter whether it's historically absolutely accurate that there were that many, or that that's exactly the way it went down. I personally tend to look at these things more. Okay, what kind of, how can that type of gathering historically, how can the teaching that was presented on that day, how can we use that now? How can I use that now to develop the qualities that the Buddha was encouraging us to develop? So not getting caught up in the history, and because also different traditions of Buddhism can have different takes on it. You might, even within Theravada, you might read different things or opinions, and we can get into scholastic analyses of what exactly happened and blah, blah, blah. And that's maybe interesting study. But if we miss the entire point of the teachings, then, what are we doing? And I'm not saying that people are missing the point, but I'm more looking at it from my own personal point of view. Because we need to, use the teachings as best we can. And for reflection, not to memorize the historical value or the historical detail, but here again, how can we use that? So, for me, I've been reflecting on this for the last several days, thinking, all right, Māgha Pūjā coming up. Like, what does that mean for me? How could that gathering and its, how can that be significant for me as sort of, food for practice, using that event. It's a very, very, very pithy, it's a very short sutta or teaching. Avoidance of all evil ways, commitment to what's wholesome, and purification of one's mind. That's so the very shortest version. Oftentimes you'll see this quoted, these first 3 lines. It's very, very well known. Because it's some people have, also they liken it to the crux, the heart of the teaching. Avoidance of all. Here it says evil ways, and because the Pali word is pasa, papa, which means unwholesome or evil. Sometimes evil. And the next line, it uses the word kusala, so that's wholesome commitment to what's wholesome, acts of wholesomeness. So simple. And I know I've read over the years and also heard other people reflect, well, wow, that's such a simple teaching for... Why was that given to 1,250 enlightened beings? They already realized Nibbana, because then then it goes on, talking about developing patience, not harming others, not being a troublemaker, not insulting or causing, wounding somebody, hurting them in, either through, I assume, through body or mind, through body, speech, or mind. To live restrained by the training rules. Then also such a more mundane thing to know how much food is enough. To actually say, to know what's enough when taking food. encouraging people to dwell alone in a quiet place. So these are actually, if you break it down, very, in some ways, so incredibly basic, and yet recorded as being, okay, there's the Buddha with these 1,250 arahants, and this is what he apparently offered. And my reflection here again this morning, just noting, the simplicity of at least my understanding, my perception of like Ajahn Chah's teachings. Simplicity, really taking the really basic and developing those. So I visited Velavana about 6 years ago. I had the privilege to go on Buddhist pilgrimage in India and Nepal, and that was one of the places, the Velavana and Vulture's Peak, and we went a couple of times during the few days that we were there, and including a full moon. Unfortunately, it was beautiful because we were able to go at night. Somehow our tour guide managed to get the park to open up, especially that night, and just let us in. And even the very high up official in charge of that region came and met us. It was quite touching in a way. He was wanted to talk about the place a little bit and to greet us. We were about 20 people, 3 monks and 17 lay people. And what I didn't realize is that they've not long before we got there, within a couple of years, they'd built a Padimokkha recitation seat up quite high. It's up on a stand. It's sort of almost 2 meters high, or maybe even more. You have to kind of go up this ladder to get on it. And then around that it's all surrounded by probably marble or some sort of very smooth stone for people to gather and listen to the Padimokkha. And we did go on the full moon, but that recitation happened much earlier in the day. And if I'd known, I would have lobbied for us to go and participate in the Padimokkha there. And they built a very beautiful shrine. But it's the bamboo grove. For those who've been there, there's a lot of bamboo. There's a lovely tank or reservoir there, and it's we were there on a very bright full moon. We went back in the evening, and we did meditation and chanting and had the place to ourselves because it was essentially closed. Now it wasn't February, it was November. It was the full moon that marks the end of the rainy season, and which is still obviously very significant. But I did find myself reflecting on, right, this is historically where this simple teaching, this profound and simple teaching was offered. And I was trying to imagine, because who knows what the boundaries of that park were like 2,500 years ago. If they know, I wasn't able to find out. I didn't have the wherewithal to ask if they were aware how big a space it would have been. But I was trying to imagine, 1,250 people gathered, in this bamboo grove area. No electric lights, no amplification. However the gathering took place. It didn't happen at night. It happened apparently in the afternoon, the gathering with the Buddha. But as I was saying earlier today, it's like, so for me, lately we've just been reflecting on it's sangha. That this day is often now referred to by some countries, Buddhist cultures, as Sangha Day, because it was a day that a large sangha gathered together around the Buddha. And then reflecting, well, what is the value of sangha? And we can find through our own reflection, meaning for ourselves. It's not to look it up in a book and say, oh, well, this is the meaning of sangha. Yes, there are things written about it. And also when we often do recitations, there's the qualities of the sangha, morning and evening puja, the chanting. But these are just the way I hold them or use them and encourage others is to just use them as a launching point or a starting point for reflection. Of course we need to stay within the realm of, not to get too out there, but, to use it for reflection. Okay, sangha, one of the translations that I've heard into English is, unified assembly. I believe that the sang is like, it's the same sang as in sankhara, which is something that's compounded or brought together, formed, something that's made. So sang and then ga, so that's unified, a group that's unified, it's been brought together and unified around certain qualities as a core. So the core being, as it mentions here, wholesomeness, to develop wholesomeness, to act wholesomely, to develop, to leave aside that which is unwholesome. And that's through all, through the three doors, through body, speech, and mind, bodily action, verbal action, and mental activity. And these things are things that can be developed. We're not just, dealt with. This is not a practice of fate. It's not a fatalistic practice. We do have the opportunity to develop, to change, to encourage, to bring about change. All of us. It's not limited. And for all of us here, if we actually look at our surroundings and consider, even just briefly, the setup in communities like this. This is obviously just one of many around the world, and I'm not just talking about Buddhist communities, but communities that encourage spiritual development. And so in this place at this time, it's all here. It's all here. We have every opportunity. We have physical, it's about as safe as we're going to get. We're all living, with some precepts, whether it's 8 precepts, 10, 150, 227. We're all living with precepts. We can all leave our stuff around and know that somebody's not going to pinch it. We all know that, we're pretty sure nobody's going to hit us or harm us. I've never known that to happen in the monastery. It could happen, but I've never known it to happen. We're all leaning towards goodness. So this is sangha. This is our unification is around virtue. And I know sometimes virtue can come across in the English language, depending on what era we were born in. It can have a little, maybe kind of, virtue. It's so virtuous. Sometimes I've heard people use it in a slightly pejorative, negative way, or almost poking fun. But virtue, when you look at the virtue, is wholesome. And sila in the Pali language, wholesome conduct, And we use our precepts, the precepts that we are, or that we did pick up. We intentionally picked them up by coming here and joining the lay support team, or being on our one of the lay managers here. We pick up the 8 precepts. That's whether we know it or not. that's just by being here, by living here. And that's, to me, quite profound. And then the anagarika training, this is a formalization of those 8 precepts. Also following the community more closely, the community standards that we have, or what's referred to in Thai as korwat. We have the novice precepts, siladhara, and bhikkhu precepts. But they all center around a very wholesome core, a very simple, wholesome core of non-harming, honesty, loyalty, sobriety, clarity of mind. When we get into the higher numbers of precepts, it's more, a lot of it's just very, very refined, and some of it's really just about how to take care of your gear, make sure your robes are taken care of, and our belongings looked after properly, and sangha property is looked after properly. But the real core is contained, even in the 5 precepts. So sangha, an intentional coming together. So this was not spontaneous, us coming together. We all, made plans to come here at various, some people have been here for many years, most of us less than that. Very intentional, very planned. None of us just dropped in. Intentionally placing ourselves into a living situation which is unified around Dhamma and Vinaya. So the teachings and the conduct, wholesome conduct. And then that's on the mundane level, and then Dhamma, to realize Dhamma on the profound level, to realize the reality, transcendent reality, ultimate peace. So using Dhamma Vinaya to realize ultimate reality, to realize unshakable peace. Now, living in community is, as we all know, whether we've been here for a month or whether we've been here in monastic life for 20, 30, 40 years, it's not about getting what we want. It's not about just fulfilling our comfort zone, padding our comfort zone, getting what we want, when we want, how we want it. But it's using the communal life. There's a give and take. There's a natural need to let go of self fulfillment. Letting go of creating a position, creating a persona, creating anything really. But it's more shedding. How can I, for the good of the group, give of myself? Now that doesn't mean that we never express ourselves, because also that's the thing about living in a unified assembly, is that if one of us, if we start to go off on our views or our practice or our understanding, our perceived understanding of the teachings or of the guidelines, the rules, then that unified assembly lifts us up, that keeps us up. So this phrase in Pali, Kalyanamita, which is, can be translated in several ways, but sort of spiritual friendship. I find that quite an inspiring translation, is spiritual friendship, that Kalyanamita. Somebody who's willing to, the people around us, that we're willing to point things out to people, or to lend ear when somebody needs to express themselves. Maybe if we're struggling or something, or maybe not even to have that type of contact, but just to be there, because it ain't easy. Spiritual practice, yes, there are certain aspects or certain times that it can be feeling quote unquote easy or smooth. But this is not it's not necessarily an easy path. And oftentimes, we speak about what we give up to live like this, giving up, especially here again, depending on what precepts we picked up, what we've made a commitment to. But I also like to really balance that out with, it's not so much what I had to give up, what the gain, not the gain on a worldly level, but the gain in terms of this privileged opportunity, to receive, the support, that we get, the 4 requisites. So we're talking about, especially this is maybe obviously more pertinent or relevant to the monastic community, but the 4 requisites of, clothing, food, lodging, and medicine. But for the lay support team, lay residents, is that apart from clothing, and actually even in some cases we can provide certain aspects of clothing, but we have medicine here, we have food, we have lodging, so we're all benefiting from right now, and ever since I can remember, the few short years I've lived here, the incredibly high level and standard of the 4 requisites. When the bhikkhu ordination, or bhikkhu upasampada, the acceptance into the bhikkhu sangha, is performed, and near the end, the preceptor takes the candidate or candidates through the 4 requisites and lays out the standard of what one should expect. And it's all the absolute lowest standard. For lodging, it's just what you can expect is a root of a tree. You've got the shade and protection of the base of a tree. For food, just any sort of whatever's put in your alms bowl, even just leftover food from whoever, just whatever's put in your alms bowl. For medicine, it just, all it mentions is fermented urine. We've got the NHS. I think they do significantly different. And then for clothing, it's just cast off cloth, even just left from that had been used to wrap a corpse. This is an absolutely bare minimum. And that's what we're told, that's what we pick up in our bhikkhu full acceptance. That's what you can expect in terms of standard. Anything else on top of that is bonus. So obviously, it's even at the time of the Buddha, it was not just like that. When we read, and as we see, even though this Owada Patimokkha was laid down before the actual Patimokkha rules were developed. So Patimokkha rules so that's the rules that make up the fortnightly recitation, that the bhikkhus have, and then the Siladhara here in our tradition have somewhat less of those rules. But those rules took many years to develop. Buddha, as I mentioned this morning, he didn't sit down and just write a rule book. He was asked to lay down rules, and he put the brakes on. He said, time will come when I'll need to, but when that time comes, that's when I'll do it. And so at this time, there were no, as far as we're aware, there were no rules as such, but there was an inherent understanding of what the conduct of a samana, of a spiritual seeker, should be following. So that's the virtuous aspect of what binds us together. And that's something that we can use. But then, having the 4 requisites gives us that safety, that support to be able to live like this, not be having to go out and make a livelihood. So for the samaneras, siladhara, and bhikkhus, our livelihood, so to speak, to gain sustenance, our livelihood is our alms bowl. That is our livelihood. That is what, and we have the right, as a spiritual seeker in this tradition, we have the right to go and collect alms. Now, obviously, we need to be careful living in a non-Buddhist country to make sure that wherever we are, living, that we're not breaking any local laws, because we must, even though we have the right within our tradition to collect alms food, we have to make sure that we're not doing something against the civil law of that country. So we're blessed in this country. We can go out and collect alms in the community, in the broader community, and I feel very fortunate here at Chithurst, and also in England, that it's all of our monasteries. If we wanted to, we can go out, and this here, especially these days, I understand many of us have been going out. Petersfield, Midhurst, Chichester, wherever, maybe up to Milan, going out with faith, going out. In most of those places we go to, we go not knowing whether we'll receive food. Don't know. And we've made that commitment, we're there, and there's not time to get back here if we don't get any food. Are you going to eat or you're not going to eat? Don't know. Or going out on what we've referred to in the Thai language as tudong, or walking pilgrimage. Many of us have had that opportunity. But having a home base like this, a unified assembly to be able to live in, as I was saying earlier, it can be quite challenging. I was speaking with some of the monks earlier this evening, and just expressing my own. Some of us were expressing, what it's like, some of the aspects of living in community and benefits, and it's not always easy. Right now, we're probably roughly about 30 people living here. So it's not about us just all being here and all able to be perfect friends the whole time, or it's not it. And as we know, I've only just come out of solitary retreat, so I'm not really fully in tune yet. I'm just starting to tune in again with the tone of the community, but I'm picking up on just a lot of harmony. The baseline is just harmony, because our unification here is around Dhamma Vinaya, not around having to be the same or be perfect friends or be mates, but There's something much more profound, which is our binding, the glue of us living together is different. And how we use that, this opportunity that each and every one of us has, and some people are just here for part of the winter, some people for the whole winter, some of us have made, most of us have made long-term commitment. It's up to us how we use whatever that amount of time is. It's up to us to use it as skillfully as possible. How can we use this time skillfully? To take the likes and the dislikes and all of it, the joys, the frustrations, the bliss, the despair, and plow all of it into our spiritual practice. To learn from that, to transcend. It's not about getting happy, making everything so now, okay, I'm happy because I've got everything is the way I want it. This is such a fragile happiness. And my understanding is it is not the happiness that the Buddha was pointing to. He was pointing at a transcendent happiness. It was beyond good, bad, liking, disliking, pain, pleasure, joy, sorrow. Beyond that, transcends that. And this is our training ground. And with the safety that we have in sangha, or in this unified assembly and this community like this, is that that we can really, this is like our laboratory, and having teachings, having the requisites, and to work with difficulty when it arises. And hopefully there are things that are not so difficult, that we can't get beyond that. Again, we're working with it within safety, within a safe environment, within an environment of understanding. We can give space to one another to also endure difficulty. If somebody's, if one of us is struggling, if, for instance, if I'm having a period of struggling, and we tend to give space. Support people. Sometimes that support, literally, it just means being there, being in community, not necessarily even having to do something, but we're there. We can also be there for each other. Give space for different temperaments, different personalities. Learn how to transcend judging, to lay aside the judgmental qualities that so many of us, like the critical qualities that get developed throughout our lives. And we're taught to be so critical. And then in an assembly like this, once again, that safety, to develop this. Really take it to heart, take this opportunity to heart. Developing wholesomeness, seeing the unwholesome, unwholesome qualities that might manifest within ourselves, because they are conditioned qualities. They can be left behind. They can be ignored. Unwholesome impulses can be ignored. They will fade. Even if they occasionally, these impulses occasionally rear their head again, they can be left. Just leave them be. Just see them for what they are. So on this day, this is just, I thought I'd offer, just a few thoughts of the way I'm currently, this year's way that I'm holding Māgha Pūjā, riffing and reflecting on this day, this evening. So I'll leave it there.